Yeah. I want to talk about the very serious issue that is the reality that capitalism has already died. This is something that I think doesn't get talked about at all, that most, even critics of capitalism, are still saying that capitalism is in decline, that capitalism is going through a period where it needs to reform itself, or all this kind of stuff. I take a far more different tact, which is to say that the capitalist system is already gone. It doesn't exist. There is no such thing as capitalism in North America any longer. That what we are doing here is we are grieving the death of the capitalist system and then moving on to a new system. And whether that system is something that benefits the populace, like a socialist system might, or even a social democratic system, if you prefer, or whether we move towards a feudal system that doesn't benefit the populace whatsoever, then that's up to us. But if we just allow the decision to be made by the powerful, if we just allow that decision to be made by the politicians and by the owners of the society, well, they're going to choose feudalism. And in fact, they already have, right? You can see it, that Bill Gates is buying up massive amounts of farmland. He's the largest farmer in North America, right? What do you think he's doing that for? The massive corporations are consolidating their power. These institutions are no different than kingdoms of yore, right? And it is only a matter of time before these wealthy people begin to intermarry with one another, because that's how you secure alliances. That the kingdom of Musk and the kingdom of Bezos will marry their daughters to one another in order to solidify power for 100 years, right? And all long live Princess Musk, right? Like the edifice of the feudal system, the pomp and the circumstance and the ceremony of it all is gone, but the fundamental structure of it is the same. That we are living in already currently today a neo-feudal structure. And if we continue to not act, if we continue to allow that structure to exist, it will just get more and more calcified and just get more and more entrenched and become more and more difficult to actually uproot. And it should be uprooted, without a doubt. And because what we're doing is grieving the death of capitalism, well, the first stage of grief is denial, right? That the first stage of grief is denial. And so you've got a lot of people who are in denial about the fact that capitalism has died. Like, no one's starting a new business. Like, that's, and even if you managed to convince the bank to give you the loans in order to start the new business, well, you're beholden to the bank, aren't you? And should you actually pay off that debt and grow that business to any substantial level, well, then one of these billionaires will come along and scoop you up, because that's how the capitalist system works. Right? Or that's how the structure of this system that we're in works. Right? Even I fall for it. I keep saying the capitalist structure, as if there is a capitalist structure any longer. Right? That the billionaires have bought the political apparatus. They own the political apparatus. It has nothing to do with the populace any longer. Right? It is a political apparatus that exists on behalf of the owners, for the owners, to decide what to do with the spoils of their wars. That's the purpose of the system as it stands now. And should the populace actually begin to use it in an attempt to reform or ameliorate their own suffering, they'll simply do away with it. Like, this idea that we will be able to reform this system through electoralism is charming. Like it's adorable in a way. Like it's very sweet and naive to believe like, oh, we'll just come to an agreement and negotiate and we'll pass legislation and that'll actually do it. Though the billionaire class is not going to let that happen. Like that's not going to happen. Period. Full stop. And there are meaningful structural impediments to that occurring, like already in place. And should it actually occur, the billionaires will just declare the democratic system over and rule through military force, which incidentally, if you haven't noticed, they're already doing. Like it's the only reason we're not actually willing to openly talk about what's happened to this society in this way is because we're still in a state of total denial about it, right? And there are people who have moved off of denial and who are living in a place of anger, right? There are people that are doing that. You could take a look at the PPC here in Canada. The PPC is outright an institution that says that something has gone horribly wrong. They don't know what has gone horribly wrong, but they know that something's gone horribly wrong, right? Which puts them head and shoulders above the conservatives and the liberals, who are still walking around pretending like everything's hunky-dory, and that, oh, we can just do some minor reforms and everything will work out just fine, when this system has obviously already died, right? So the PPC is actually ahead of the liberals and conservatives in terms of their political astuteness, because they're at least admitting that something's gone wrong, and they're very angry about it, right? And a society that moves from denial into anger, right, and then and then you have anger into bargaining, which negotiating with these billionaire psychopaths, like that's just a recipe for a disaster. And then what follows? Depression, right, and then finally acceptance, and then the finding of meaning. Well, the trajectory that we are on right now is absolutely a path towards neo-feudalism if we are not already there. And it will become obvious. It will become more and more obvious. And as a quick response to those people who just are like, oh, just go find a different job if you don't like the job you have, all of the jobs are owned by the billionaire class, right? The share system through the stock market means that all the same people own all of the businesses. That if you are working for Future Shop or whatever, and you decide, I'm going to stop working for Future Shop and go work for McDonald's, let's say, you're working for the same people because the same people own all of the corporations. They own all of the institutions, right? That and all that's left for anybody, if they don't want to work for these billionaires, is to work for like an independent retailer, who are few and far between, or an independent store or something like this, who are few and far between and are usually beholden to the banks, which guess who owns the fucking banks? So the system is a neo-feudal structure. The billionaire class owns the society. They own the politicians. They own everything. And all we can do, if we want to ameliorate that significant problem, is to surround the halls of power with thousands and thousands of people. That's it. We literally are at the stage where we have to do a Bug's Life on it. Where like we are a bunch of ants and they are crickets, and we can just all get together and refuse to work for these guys, right? And we should refuse to work for them until their assets are removed. Like, we should not be begging for scraps like the fight for 15 people. We should not be begging for base, meager subsistence. We should be saying to the people who have power in this society, you no longer have the right to rule. You no longer have the right to have assets, to have wealth, to own the means of production. We are removing them from you. We are no longer participating in a system that is structured this way, and we are transferring the means of production to the populace. That is what we should be doing. We're not. And so the steady march into neo-feudalism is almost set in stone. That the only thing that we can do to stop it, we're simply not. So, and it's going to get very obvious, very, very soon, like very, very soon. If it's not already obvious, like, which I think it actually is, but the first stage of grief is denial.